Okay, guten Morgen. So herzlich willkommen bei Vaadin zu Entwicklertag. And that's all my German I can know. So I'll continue in English, so don't worry about that. So, welcome. My name is Ville Ingman, like I was introduced here from the Vaadin team, and I was asked to give you a presentation on Vaadin as an introductory level. What is Vaadin? So, I would like to understand who is here today a bit. So, how many of you actually have heard about Vaadin before? Yeah, quite many. How many of you are actually using Vaadin for something today? Okay, few hands still. So you guys can help me out if I am going to trouble. Okay, so let's start talking about Vaadin. And first, actually, I would like to get you guys inside my twisted head, my twisted mind, what is this all about? So I want to give you a little story about a software developer called Jake. So he was a guy that worked for a medium-sized software company, and they have a fat client. They have been maintaining that for 15 years. It was built with Swing. There was huge Oracle databases and everything there. All Java enterprise, but not web yet. So Jake's boss came to him one day and asked him that, hey, we want to do a web client for the product that we have. Okay, so Jake was basically the #1 software developer, and he thought that, okay, this is an honor. So he started to look into things, and okay, modern web stuff, yeah, there's Ajax, there's JavaScript, there's CSS3 and everything there. So, okay, I'll start looking into that. And he worked for 2 weeks that he got time for that. He used his Google Chrome as the best browser, of course. And then the little prototype was ready. And it was basically a screen where they did a database call, and it updated some text actually within the buttons and everything to see how the query progresses on the back end. And the boss was pretty astonished about the work, so he called the customers to the demo event as well. And the customers came in, and they wanted to try it out. So what they did, they fired up their Internet Explorer browsers, and they started to, okay, try that out. So what happened? Well, nothing actually happened. None of the buttons actually worked. Nothing happened. So this is kind of the problematic area where we try to be helping you guys, keeping you guys out of trouble. So developing for web for multiple browsers, that can be a challenging thing when talking about business applications. So Vaadin is trying to be one solution for that. So let's go ahead and see what it's all about. So what is Vaadin? Well, Vaadin is actually a Finnish word for reindeer. So that's what Vaadin is. So all the geek guys can start to see actually the horns and the nose in the logo. But what is Vaadin? So Vaadin is a web framework for building rich web applications. Here in the reindeer you can see different things that, okay, these are coming within Vaadin. So we'll go through this later on. Most of all, what Vaadin is actually, it's a set of building blocks. So you can actually think yourself as a guy who turns into a child again to start building things about Lego bricks. Ready-made bricks for you, and you can build your own thing from that. That's Vaadin, set of components. All the UI components that you would expect from a modern web framework, basically. Lazy loading tables, drag and drop, different kind of selectors, what you might need in your UI project. Vaadin is also, okay, the contrast isn't that good, but what here is that there's some components that aren't visible. There's some data binding components, of course. So you can bind your data actually from the back end to the UI easily. And also, there are different themes, like we call them, packages of look and feel. So these are just a bunch of CSS, plain web stuff, basically. But here's a couple of example themes that comes from Vaadin out of the box. So if you just start writing Java with Vaadin, this is what you get by default. And after that, you can customize your work with CSS, and we'll actually see something about that later on as well. So the basic idea here is that when you write something with Vaadin, you write it once, and you can run it with all these browsers. So basically, one job, and all the browsers are covered already. And the set of, well, it's basically all major browsers that you can think of today. and also phones, tablets, those are included. So what a Vaadin application might look like. So this is one example application that we did. It's basically a software for monitoring a movie theater operations, how the tickets are selling or different movies are selling, do some reporting there. And all this is running within the browser window. There's no plugins, no nothing. It's just the web address, and you go there with your browser, and this is what you get. So here's some lazy loading tables you can see here. And what else do we have? Yeah, some cool, fancy charting. And the schedule for different movies. You can drag and drop them around to organize them and all that. So this is one example how the Vaadin application might look like. So, or you can do the same thing on a tablet. So it's basically coming out of the box as well. So the next obvious question, I think, is that how does it really work? So let's see about that. So here's a small code snippet for Vaadin. As you can see, it's all Java. And how many of you have actually done something with Swing? Yeah, almost everybody actually. So the code might look familiar. Actually, the programming concept is pretty much identical. We just handle components, we handle layouts, we register listeners to different components to listen to the events. So here, what is done is basically a text field and a button, and we declare that, okay, I'm going to be listening for the events from the button, basically the click events. So when someone goes with a browser to the address where this application is located, this is what happens. So basically the initial HTML page and all the theming, the CSS is loaded there, and then they also loaded the JavaScript client-side part, the widget set that we call it. And the widget set that we use is built with Google Web Toolkit nowadays. So this is pretty much what you get to the screen. And this is the visual. That's what the code actually produced on the screen. So when someone goes there and writes a name and clicks the button, what happens? There goes an AJAX call back to the server side, and only a few bytes. Basically, the only thing that changed on the screen was sent to the server. And on the server side, this piece of code gets called. So basically, the listener code. And in this case, we just choose to show a notification on the screen, hi, and the value that was put there. And then the response comes back, few bytes, to tell to the client so that, okay, saw a notification, and there it is. So that's basically the concept how Vaadin works. And if we look at the web app layers, these are the layers that exist in all web applications, starting from the left. Basically the backend server, of course, the database and all. Then comes the web server, Tomcat, something similar. Communications from the server to the client, in this case the browser. And of course there are a few options, either JavaScript or Java to JavaScript. And for Vaadin, the whole thing looks like this. So what is required for you to actually build anything with Vaadin? You are required to do the backend, of course, and the web server code, the UI logic in Java. But that's all that is required. You can go to the other layers as well, but this is the only thing that is required from you. If you take Google Web Toolkit, for example, the same thing applies. You need the backend server, you need the web server, but you also have to do the communications, and you have to do the client-side part as well. So there's more layers that you have to write and maintain yourself. And just JavaScript. If you do a handmade JavaScript client-side UI, the same here applies. You have to do all the layers yourself. So in terms of architecture for Vaadin applications, so here's the same thing in a different angle. Web server here, you have the backend, and you have the UI logic. These white boxes are the ones that you have to write to get anything on the screen with Vaadin. And then comes the components. This is the Vaadin API, the Java API. It's basically everything is a component. You use these components. There might be some custom components there written by someone else, or you, or some add-ons. You'll see some add-ons later on. But all of these components, they reside on the server side. So that's where they are. And all the components, they have a counterpart on the browser side, and they're called widgets. So there's always the pairing, server-side component and the client-side component. And of course, on the browser side, a question?
Maybe it's
yeah.
too early. Is there any communication between the widgets on the client side, or is all communication going through the server?
Of course, there's some actions, within the widget code itself on the client side. But mostly when there's some action needed or some action happens really that needs some reaction from the UI logic, that is asked from the server side. Okay, we'll continue. Okay, where were we? So basically on the browser side, the theming is there, CSS code and all. But you can also have your custom UI, client-side UI code there. So this is, that can be a JavaScript component you found from the web and you want to use that. You can integrate that directly to the client side of Vaadin as well. And these UI components, they can have their own service bypassing the Vaadin backend if you need to. So let's talk about the top picks about features. Okay, then now we know that the Vaadin is basically a component library, Java library, but let's look at some top picks for Vaadin. I think this is pretty much the biggest thing. Vaadin includes Google Web Toolkit nowadays. So if you have a Google Web Toolkit project, you can take the Vaadin libraries, drop them there, and your application works just like it did earlier as well. So that's what is there. And we are basically contributing back to the Google Web Toolkit and getting, of course, contributions from Google Web Toolkit projects to ourselves. This is actually one of the most common questions that I hear. What's the future of Google Web Toolkit? What's the status of Google Web Toolkit today? And here's some words about that. So basically, if someone didn't know yet, Google Web Toolkit is actually controlled by a steering committee nowadays. And the steering committee are these companies and individuals that run it. So we are one of them. And Google is there, of course, Sencha, obviously, and Red Hat. And these key individuals are basically the fathers of Google Web Toolkit in the first place. And where Google actually uses Google Web Toolkit, well, this is a long list, but as you can see from the top, I think around 95% of Google revenue is coming from a Google Web Toolkit-based application. So it's not going to be fading away or anything like that. So people are thinking, okay, Google is doing Dart nowadays. What's going to happen for Google Web Toolkit? Well, to us, it seems that nothing. They're basically two optional tools for you to have. So nothing dramatic there. So back to the features of Vaadin. So a view management. I think this is a pretty cool feature in Vaadin. So basically, when you go to a Vaadin application, it's a single-page application. There's actually no page transitions going on within your application at all. But with the view management, you can kind of fake that. So you can navigate through your application. You can have bookmarks. You can have direct links to different parts of your application, whether it's a single-page application anyways. And then comes the theming, the SAS. SAS comes from words syntactically awesome style sheets, and that's what it really is. So anyone has been using SAS? One guy. Two. Few of you have seen the light already. So what SAS is, it's basically that now you can pretty much program your CSS files. And I think that's an awesome thing. A few examples here. Variables and functions. So on the right-hand side, you see the basic CSS. On the left hand is the SAS version. So there you can see variables, and you can have functions there. So this changes the way that you can actually think how to create your look and feel for a web application. And this is not only for Vaadin. SAS is a general mechanism. You can use that in any web project or anything like that. So this is a really cool thing to look at. Other examples, mixins. You can actually mix things here. On the left-hand side, you can see that, okay, Here we are including things to the whole thing and use some variables there. Here are the mixins for that. And on top is basically the base declaration for one table look and feel. Nesting, obviously. I think this is a really cool thing. Well, CSS didn't support any nesting whatsoever, so this is, can simplify your CSS files greatly. And selector inheritance. Here, for example, you declare an error, how an error looks like, and then you have a bad error. So you just extend that and continue declaring more variables to that. Okay, something else, the JavaScript integration. So in Vaadin 7, we introduced quite a lot of new mechanisms to actually, if you have some existing JavaScript or you want to use some JavaScript library or widget or some gimmick, you can basically wrap that in a simple way to a Vaadin component and still basically write a simple component API so that you can access your JavaScript from your server-side code as you do with all other Vaadin components as well. So this is a good, really cool addition to Vaadin. So automated RPC. So basically, if you saw the code there, it's basically just like swing code. You handle abstract things like a button, a table, a text field. There's not too much actually that tells you that this is a web application anyway. So there's you don't see any RPC calls whatsoever in your code. So because this abstraction level is so high, we can actually hide and do quite a lot of things under the hood. So nowadays, with the latest final release for Vaadin, it's basically a request-based by default. If something happens on the client, some button is clicked or anything, that's happening within Vaadin itself. You don't have to worry about how the actual call comes in. But also in 7.1, we're introducing server push, and that is actually working with all of your UIs already because it's behind the hood. You can do server push with your existing code as well. If I have time at the end, I can show you the push in action. If I don't, come and talk to me and I can show it on a private show. So deployment, it's Java. It's a web application, technically a servlet. So you can deploy that on any web container, portal container, most clouds already. And this is actually pretty cool for people getting started with Vaadin. We introduced the Vaadin cloud as well, together with Jelastic. So if you write your Vaadin code, create a Jelastic account, and you can put that online to the cloud. And also Google App Engine is supported directly from the Eclipse plugin. So when should I use Vaadin? This is actually, I think that for people looking for introductory level for Vaadin, this is probably the most important thing to understand. Okay, so pay attention. So when should I use Vaadin? Here you should use Vaadin. So what are we actually seeing here? Okay, it's ugly, yes. You should use Vaadin to make it look better. But what we actually have here is some business application, a backbone application that is used for running your businesses and doing some operations, running things. Data-centric, data-intensive application. These are the ones that Vaadin is designed for. So here's not a web page, a home page or anything like that for you. Vaadin isn't designed for that. It's designed for something like this. So ask yourself before using any web framework, where is your application? Is it it's a website or is it a web application? So website is a content-centric. So there's not too many interactions, not too many dynamic actions or dynamic rendering going there. It's a static site, more or less. Of course, there can be some cool gimmicks there, but it's mostly static. And the web apps are really data-centric. So what fits where? I try to distinguish it like this. So basically, if you have a website, a low abstraction level framework is most probably the best one for you. What is a low abstraction level framework? It's basically something that you are forced and you can fiddle with all the little details throughout the whole system, the DOM structure on the browser, everything. It's also simple, so there's not too many things that might, come into your way when you're trying to do some pixel-perfect designs that you got from your designers. And on the web app side, the high abstraction level frameworks are here. And Vaadin is a high abstraction level framework. So basically, Vaadin here, JSF or Wicked or something over there, or just JSP pages with some custom JavaScript. They are there. So that's basically the thing that you should understand. And finally, do realize that your application might need both of these. So an example, a content management system, if you want to build one. There's probably two sides in a content management system. The one that actually shows the web pages, that is a content-centric side. And then you have an administrative tools to actually run the whole thing. That's here, the data-centric side. So one tool for everything, that doesn't apply, even here. So please use Vaadin here, not there, and don't choose any of those frameworks when doing things like this. That's the most important thing I want to say actually here. So let's see about the server-side Java that Vaadin has. So why is it a good thing? And now we're talking in a context of web applications, like you saw, where Vaadin is designed for. Of course, the browsers, they can be evil. Everybody knows the truth about Internet Explorer 6, Internet Explorer 7, how good they are, how buggy they are. So browsers are all different. Browsers have bugs. Browsers have different computing power to actually execute JavaScript. So they are really different animals. And if you want to do an application that supports multiple browsers, that basically means that you have to somehow support multiple platforms in a sense as well. JavaScript can be evil. To do a handmade JavaScript, I actually have a few examples I want to show you how evil JavaScript can be. Let's see. Okay, here we have it. So here's just the JavaScript console. I'm executing JavaScript here on the terminal. And I'm a Java guy. I'm just plain Java guy. And I found something from the web, from different blogs, from different sources, how JavaScript actually works. And these are the things that really blew up my mind. So is this even possible? So I just thought that I'd share it with you guys as well. So let's do some, here the JavaScript console, basically, if you write here something, a number, it evaluates this row. So it's a number 5. So if we do some math stuff, so here the minimum number from math should be smaller than the max, right? This should be true, but it's not. It's false. So if I put here like this is infinity. And that's minus infinity. What's going on? So Java guy would expect things, and here it doesn't apply. So another example, number. This should be smaller than 0, but it's not still. So think about when you're doing your comparisons in your statements, how JavaScript actually works. And if you want to do some clever things, you're a clever guy, so let's play around with some things like this. This should be true. Yes, it is. But please check this another way around as well. This should be true as well, but it's not. It's false. So this is how JavaScript works. The last example here is basically that it first checks is 3 greater than 2. It returns true, actually, there, and true is number 1 internally. So it just goes past, just fine, yeah, you know, no problems here, no errors or anything. But the actual clause was false. So, a few other things. An array plus an array. This could be maybe an array as well, but it's an empty string, of course. And a few other examples. This actually means also that this should be false, right? But it's true. It's still undefined, the actual array there. So be really careful with this stuff. A few other things. If I try to do some crazy stuff, plussing an array with an object in JavaScript, this should cause some errors, you know, not able to compute or anything like that. But it just gives you an object. No problem. And as this was a plus operation, I'll try to do it another way. This should be the same thing, right? So that's a 0. So what's going on? And if I try to do an object plus object, so I would expect this to be an object or an error, something. But what this is not a number. So let's talk about not a number. So is not a number, same thing that's not a number? False, it's not. So the not a number is an interesting beast. If I try to ask, what is the type of not a number from JavaScript? Anyone know what this is? What's the type of not a number? It's a number. So you know, a few examples. If you try to be clever with JavaScript, you probably are fucked. That's what I'm saying. So these kind of things you might actually get from your JavaScript code. There's some error, something is empty, or something doesn't go right, and you try to compare the empty arrays with something, you're probably screwing up the whole thing already. So for little home projects, probably pretty cool, but when you're doing some business applications, not so good idea. So that was some JavaScript examples. I can't even explain how some of these actually work. I'm a Java guy. I don't even want to know. So that's the mantra for Vaadin as well. We try to keep you guys out of that kind of trouble. So, oops, just a second. And here. Yeah, that was JavaScript. And of course, the browser-server communication can be evil. What this means is that if you write something with JavaScript, homemade, or handmade client-side, the code base is actually available for all of the users that access the application, which means that everyone can read your code, everyone can intercept with all of the requests that are actually sent there. So this means that client-side validation for the data is not enough. You always need server-side validation as well for the data. So some people actually think, I've seen a few examples of this case where a framework is started to use a framework in an internal project. That's how they all begin, basically. You have an internal project, a prototype, you do something, And it works just fine. And then you continue to use that, and then comes the extranet service, and then comes the internet service, and you reuse the same thing. But when you actually step outside your trusted network, the whole thing explodes, basically. You know, the same things don't apply anymore. There might be an evil guy actually using your system. It can read all the validation stuff. It can read what you do actually with the data. So it's vulnerable. Be prepared. Be careful. So I would actually like to compare this like this. So if you do handmade client side, it's like building a freaking awesome treehouse. I think that's awesome. It's beautiful. And the server side is for building apartment buildings. So this is the difference. If I have a hobby project, I don't want to build any apartment buildings as a hobby project. I want to do those. But if I do something for a living and I'm going to maintain it for 20 years, I don't want to maintain that for 20 years if someone else has built that, the first version. And then I should go in there and change the windows to something else, or change the door. I don't want to do that. But here, I could do that, no problem. I just order new ones and they fit. So this is the difference between these two approaches. So this one fits for the web application, business application side, and that really doesn't. So about web frameworks, okay, this is the technical side, the features, you know how Vaadin is, but what about the other side? If I use that, is there anyone else? What about the community? So a few words about that. So Vaadin developer community nowadays, rough numbers here, are roughly 100,000 developers right now, mostly in Europe, and then comes Americas and Asia. And this is actually some numbers from the unique visitors at Vaadin.com. We launched Vaadin back in 2009, and after that, steady growth all the time. Actually surprised as well. And in Germany, the same thing. These are just snapshots from Google Analytics. So the last dip here is basically analytics technical detail. So it didn't crash here, don't worry. And by country, the last 3 years, US has been the biggest one, but the last 6 months, Germany has been the most active one. So I guess we can applaud that for Germany, right? Oops. Yeah. So this is how Germany looks. The contrast is pretty awful. But anyway, let's go forward. So a community is also, it's always smart. It's probably smarter than you, so admit that. So one of the coolest things that we did for Vaadin is we created a way and a place for the community to speak up. And in Vaadin, you can write your own component, a server-side component, a client-side component, and you can wrap that in one jar file. So we introduced the Vaadin directory, where you can actually post these custom components of yours in one jar file. And everyone that uses Vaadin, they can get the same component to the project. And this is the place where our community basically contributes really easily great ideas to Vaadin, and also some crazy ideas. So let's see a few of those crazy ideas. There's quite a lot of components already, around 300 extra. Different input fields, charting, lazy loading stuff, reporting, Google Maps integrations, things like that. And most of these are things that are either going to Vaadin library itself, or they're just cool ideas that never get to Vaadin library itself. It doesn't make sense. So here's one example of those. The paper stack component. In some project, there was a use case and a need for a paper stack, and this is what was done. So it's here. You can download it here, and it's basically like Vaadin code itself, just Java. New paper stack component, say how the paper stack behaves, and add that to the screen. You can even get them from Maven Maven directly to your project. And this is what you get. So you can use that in your project if you want to. It doesn't exist in Vaadin core library, but it's available. So this is pretty cool. So Vaadin itself, for community, the Apache 2.0 licenses for Vaadin. It's business liberal. So you can use it. You don't have to tell us anything about that. But that's also something that we suffer a bit. We need the feedback. One of the things that how Vaadin has been so successful is that we are pretty much involved with various customer projects where Vaadin is used. We drink our own champagne. I think that is really critical for any open source project to actually be successful. Be involved in projects where it's used, so you can really see what is required and what doesn't work. So basically where the living comes from as a company there, pretty simple story, consulting, support, and few pro add-ons. That's how the living comes from. So we get our money off helping you guys. That's how the whole thing works. And there are other helpers as well. Vaadin operates on a global level, and there are also local partners here. In Germany, we have 2 partners already for giving solutions with Vaadin. And Andrena here has also Vaadin experience. So it's pretty outstanding already. So this is I want to explain here how Vaadin supports people as well. So most of you guys, if you get serious with Vaadin, you probably do it on some business application side, and your management asks, what about the support? So here's a few slides about that. So basically, what we have, the basis for all of our support and help is something called the Pro account. The key account is for bigger teams that use Vaadin on a longer term. They can see a time span of 2 years, and big teams, that's for them. But all of these include this Pro account, so a few words about that. So one Pro account is for one developer. That's you. And it consists of developer support and few software licenses. On the developer support side, you can do support requests, ask questions from Vaadin, report some bugs. If you find a bug on Vaadin, we'll fix that for you, and you don't get stalled down because of our mistake, so you can continue your work. And also security alerts. That's really important for rich web applications. If you have something in production and we find a security threat, we announce that and we give you a fix for that. Software licenses, there's JRebel. Anyone using JRebel already? One? Who doesn't know what JRebel is? Few? So check that out. It's basically a tool for getting rid of server restarts when doing coding. It basically hot swaps your Java code all the time to the server, so you don't have to do any restarts. So all the changes are going to the web server. Really good. So then comes these few pro add-ons that we've done. The Vaadin TouchKit, TestBench and charts, I actually have them here. The Vaadin TestBench is a testing tool for automating your regression tests for UI level. So you can basically record your use cases. You can even use visual comparisons to get some theming issues there. So you have a visual test case for Internet Explorer and for Opera and for Safari. And after some changes, the Opera visual went broke, basically. So you're unable to catch that without testing everything manually. Really powerful when you are going to production and you have to deal with regressions. The Vaadin TouchKit, you can write mobile UIs that have the same look and feel than iOS has. It has the convenience, components, and methods that people are expecting from a mobile application. And you can start that within your browser without those browser address bars or anything like that. So you don't really even see that it's a web application that you're using. And the Vaadin charts, using HiCharts library, probably the best charting library there is, so you can have your charts pretty cool with Vaadin as well. So, how to get started? Tutorials, vaadin.com is obviously a good place for you. There's an Eclipse plugin. Just install that. There's wizards to create a new Vaadin project, new Vaadin component, new theme, and everything. You can even use the visual editor in the Eclipse, drag and drop some components there and really see how the code is generated for you and then start from that hands-on. Or you can use Maven, or you can download the book. I actually carried a few of the books here, so there's a couple of books for the fastest ones, all that I could carry there for you guys. And things to look at when you really start doing stuff with Vaadin. CDI in Vaadin, that's a cool thing for enterprise apps. The MVP pattern to really do your UI architecture the right way, use MVP. SAS again. And things to understand. Try to reuse our ideas. Everything is a component. When you do a view where you search something, there's a search field, a button, and a search result table. Do a component from that. Call it your search component and reuse it all around your application where you need to search something. That gives a consistent look and feel and minimizes your work. And don't do component abuse. This is something that we see happening. People use too complex components for showing simple things. So people have to understand that in such frameworks that Vaadin is, there is always a DOM structure and internal functionality within all of these components. And if you use a heavy component and put 1,000 heavy components on the screen, it might get sluggish. So use the right component when you build things. Try to keep things simple still. So what about the future? Actually, the future says that my time is running out just now. The future is HTML5, obviously. And this is not even ready. This is how HTML5 is going to be in the future. So that's the platform that we are looking into. Things that we have for the next 6 months. But those that want to see something, I'm here to show that later on. Any questions? That's all I got today. No questions? Everything? Ah, all right.
Are you using any model-driven software development techniques to map those layers?
So, could you come again?
Did you use any model-driven development, so meta models and transformations inside Vaadin?
How the data? Are you basically asking how you're actually integrating some data model to Vaadin? Yeah, that was actually the one slide that I showed shortly. There was this property, item, and container. Those are just terms that Vaadin understands. So a container, for example, is equal to a list of objects. So basically, there are different implementations, container implementations like the SQL container, a Hibernate container, a Java Bean container. So all the Vaadin components understand this data structure. So you can basically take one container implementation from another table and put that to another that supports a container, and it works. So that's the data binding mechanism within Vaadin. Any other questions, comments? Either everyone understood everything or no one understood anything. Okay, thanks. That's all I have.